Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video. Here on the table I have one of the new power stations from DJI. This is the larger of the two that they released. This is called the Power 1000. Now, one unique thing about this power station that no other power station can do, this one can fast charge their quadcopters and drones. So if you have those, this is going to be a big advantage. Now don't worry, this power station still has all the other features you're looking for. For example, on the inside, you have an LFP battery. It's safe, long-lasting, and it's rated at 1,024 watt-hours of capacity. You also have a large pure sine wave inverter. It's rated at 2,200 watts continuous output. That means you can connect up pretty much any appliance that plugs into a normal wall outlet. That means a vacuum, power tools, full-size refrigerator, coffee maker, all that stuff will run off this individually. You also have internal fast wall charging, so you can charge this up really quick. Through this port right here, you have the option to charge at 1,200 watts or 600 watts with that switch right below. This does have a UPS functionality, and it's perfect for running your devices during a power outage. And I'll be showing you guys the actual cutover time that I tested later in the video. This has upgraded USB-C 140 watt power delivery ports, so you can charge laptops, mobile devices extremely fast. There are two of those. So if you want that fast charging, it is available. Now right here, these SDC ports that are meant for charging their quadcopters and drones, you can also get a high DC output through these ports. So if you're looking to power larger DC loads, you can do that through both of these ports, and I'll be demoing that later in the video. This does have the ability to charge with solar input. You have to purchase their external solar charge controller. You can actually attach two of them through the SDC ports, and I'll be showing you that later as well. Now, if you guys are new to my channel, I'm a little bit different than other influencers or content creators on YouTube. I'm not going to just say purchase this product. What I do is I do extensive and in-depth testing on the power station to see how it actually works, to give you guys an educated decision on if this one is right for you. Everyone has a different use case, so what I'm going to show you guys is how this actually performs, and you guys can decide if you want to purchase it or not. So up next, we are going to start all of that testing. We are going to test the AC inverter to see what voltage output it has, to see if it's a pure sine wave, to see how many watts we can pull before it shuts down. We are going to test the DC output to see if there's some sort of limitation. We're going to test the USB ports to see if they're the proper protocol. And of course, we're going to do a bunch of charging demos. Now, because there are just so many different tests, I've broken that up into different chapters. So if you look at the bottom of the video, you can see the AC testing, the DC testing, and the charging demos. So because this is a portable unit, it's really lightweight. It only comes in at about 28 pounds. I want to test the DC output first, because this is great for portable power when you're camping or charging up mobile devices. So let's see how much power we can get from those ports. Now here's a closer look at both of those ports. The top one is the SDC port. The bottom one is the light SDC port. Now these kind of remind me of a larger XT90 connection, but it has a few communication pins here. Now these are designed for both DC input and output. And in this part of the video, we are going to be testing for the output power that is available through both of these ports. Now there are actually two dongles that you can purchase to use these SDC ports as an output. This one right here is an SDC to 12-volt cigarette socket, and this one here is an SDC to XT60. So let's plug both these in and see how much power we can get from these ports. So for the first test, I'm using the 12-volt cigarette dongle, and I have my battery load tester plugged in. We are pulling 158 watts. Now I can't go much higher than that. If I go any higher, it seems to shut off the DC output. Now there's actually a label on the dongle with the 12-volt cigarette port that says the output is rated for 12 volts and 10 amps max. So we are getting just a little bit more power available through this dongle. Now in the next test, I want to use this other dongle with the XT60 to see if we can get more power. We are pulling around the same amount of power, 159 to 160 watts. I'm just going to turn this up and see if it goes any higher. So it looks like it also shuts off at about 160 watts. Now I want to test the light SDC port to see if we can get any more power. I'm using the dongle with the 12-volt cigarette port on it, and we are getting right about 160 watts. So right where we were with the previous one. Let's turn this up and see if it goes any higher. Nope, so it looks like it shuts off as you go over 160 watts, just like the previous port. Now the first thing I noticed when I went to test the DC output is that there's no DC output button to turn it on. Whenever you plug in the dongle, it lights up this light here and it illuminates the screen icons right here. And both of them say 13.6 volts. So with my battery load tester connected up to the dongle, I'm also measuring a regulated 13.6 volts output. So the screen is definitely accurate to the voltage that it's putting out. Now, how much power can we get if we use both ports at the same time? So with two battery load testers, one connected up to each port, we're getting around 320 watts output. So lots of power available through both of those ports. Now the Power 1000 has 4 USB ports to charge up your mobile devices. You have 2 USB-A ports, good for 24 watts each, and then you have 2 USB-C power delivery ports, good for 140 watts each. Connecting to the first 140 watt USB-C power delivery port, with my USB tester, we're seeing power delivery 3.1 at 140 watts. So it is 28 volts at 5 amps, and we are seeing the same power on both units. Connecting up to the second 140 watt port, we are also measuring power delivery 3.1 protocol at 140 watts. So right under 28 volts at 5 amps, and we are seeing the same power input as the same power output. Now moving on to the first USB-A quick charge port, we are seeing quick charge 2.0 protocol at 12 volts and right around 18 watts input and output on both devices. Now checking the last USB-A port, it is also showing quick charge 2.0 protocol, so it is designed and functioning just like the previous port. Now I like to make sure that you can use all the USB ports at the same time. So in this test, I have the Energizer 320 charging at 100 watts. I have this power bank charging at 140 watts, and I have both of these devices charging off the USB-A. We are seeing about 250 watts out from the power station to these devices, and all ports work at the same time. Now, what about using the USB ports and the DC output at the same time? Well, with all the USB ports connected and both of the DC outputs connected, we are pulling over 540 watts from the power station. So yes, you can use both the USB ports and the DC output at the same time for a massive amount of power. How much usable capacity can we expect as we discharge the power station? The Power 1000 has an advertised capacity of 1,024 watt hours. While draining the power station completely down until the DC output shut off, I was able to measure 886 watt hours. These results were 86.5% of the advertised capacity, which is right on par with other models I've tested. Now, how much idle background power is used while the DC output is enabled? The first time I started this test, the DC output shut off fairly quickly when there was no load connected, probably within 10 minutes. So if you want the DC output to stay enabled, you will need a very small constant load connected. Now, how big of a load? Well, in my testing, I discovered you'll need a load of at least 2 watts to keep it from shutting off. I started the test at 100% state of charge, and checking in 12 hours later, it was at 90% state of charge with that 2 watt load running in the background. So the idle power usage for the DC output is definitely less than 1% per hour. The big question is, can it run a 12 volt fridge without it turning off? A 12 volt fridge sits idle for long periods of time, pulling very little power. I tested with my Iceco APL35 connected, and the DC output remained on for 12 hours with no issue. So it seems a 12 volt fridge pulls just enough idle power usage to keep the DC output enabled. Now, I will tell you guys, during all the testing for the DC output, the fans are completely silent. You never hear the fans turn on, so that's a huge thumbs up. I like the ability to get 160 watts out of each one of those ports using the DC output dongles, so you can get a lot of power to power diesel heaters, 12 volt air compressors. High-powered DC loads should not be an issue on these SDC ports. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any DJI drones or quadcopters to test the fast charging, but I have seen that demonstrated in other videos, and it seems to work just fine. So if you have those, don't worry, it's just a plug-and-play solution to charge those up. Now, the only worry that I did have with this was the auto shut-off, but it seems that if you have a load connected up, there's not a problem. I tested my APL35, and it ran overnight without any issues, even though when it sits completely idle, it's only pulling like 1.5 to 2 watts. So most 12 volt fridges are going to be fine running off this port here. So thumbs up to the DC output. It's good to see that there's a lot of power available and it's completely silent when running. So in the next section of the video, we are going to be testing the AC inverter. We want to see what voltage output we get, if it's a pure sine wave, how it handles induction loads, and so forth. Now I will say there are two different ways to turn on the AC inverter. If you press and hold the AC button, it will turn on the AC inverter with no auto shut-off settings. It will keep the inverter on until the power station dies. Now, if you want to have some sort of eco mode or auto shut-off setting, if it doesn't sense any power, you can just press the AC button once and you'll see it kind of going in and out of this LED flashing mode. And that means that eco mode is on and it will automatically shut off if it senses no power. There are different use cases for that, but just be aware you have the ability to turn it on in two different modes. So let's jump into the testing on the AC inverter. How does the power station perform under a max load test? First, I started by setting up a 2200 watt load on the inverter. This is what it's fully rated at. After the test had been going for a few minutes, I moved my camera over to check out my oscilloscope. It was showing a pure sine wave output and I measured 121 volts at 60 hertz, even while the power station was under peak load. After about 10 minutes of running that 2200 watt load, the cooling fans were at their full speed and I measured 52 decibels with my sound meter at 3 feet away, so these fans aren't very loud at all. Next, I measured the air exhaust temperature with my thermal camera. I saw a peak of 109 degrees Fahrenheit near the fan exhaust ports, meaning they do an excellent job moving air through the inside of the power station. My stopwatch soon hit the 15-minute mark, and the DJI Power 1000 passed the max load test without shutting down. How many more watts will the inverter allow you to pull before it overloads? I turned up the load from our previous test till it got up to about 2822 watts, and then the inverter shut down. So it's good to see the inverter does have a little bit of leeway if you need to pull slightly higher than 2200 watts, and I also like that it gives you a little beep to warn you that you're pulling over the rated power. So next I want to test the surge capability of the DJI Power 1000 inverter. Now it's rated at 2200 watts continuous, but how well does it actually surge? So we're going to test with this 10 amp air compressor, this 12 amp vacuum, and this 15 amp table saw. Now these are all induction loads, so they pull a lot of amps on startup, and that's what the purpose of this test is. Some power stations can handle surge loads and some can't. Now in order to measure the peak amperage that this device pulls, I have my clamp meter set to inrush mode. This will show the peak amperage as this starts up. So let's go ahead and turn it on. So we measured a total of 24 amps as the 10 amp air compressor started up, and the inverter handled it just fine. Let's step up to a larger load. So next we are going to test with this 12 amp vacuum. Keep an eye on the meter. Let's see how much power it pulls. So the vacuum pulled a total of 34.61 amps on startup, and the inverter handled it just fine. Now the biggest test for surge current is going to be this 15 amp table saw. So I have everything set up. I'm going to put the camera down. We're going to flip on the saw and see what happens. So as the table saw turned on, it pulled a total of 35.78 amps. Quite a bit of power for a 2200 watt inverter, and the inverter handled it really well. Now I really like this test because it gives you a real world example of how the inverter will do when powering large loads. So if you have some large power tools or appliances that pull similar induction loads, you should be good powering them off the DJI Power 1000. Now the DJI 1000 also supports UPS functionality with an advertised cutover time of 20 milliseconds. Now I want to test to see how long it actually takes to swap over to see if it can run sensitive devices like my desktop workstation, monitor, or even studio lights. So I have that all connected to the AC inverter. It is wall charging in UPS mode, and I have my oscilloscope connected up so we can actually track the cutover time when it swaps over to battery backup. Let's get started. Now I've just started a stress test on the PC so we can push the internal power supply to its limits. Now I have this set to record mode, so let's go ahead and get started. 3, 2, 1, record. Okay, so we actually caught the recording of the cutover. Now you'll notice that it stops abruptly right here, and that's because this entire thing was over here behind the measurements here. So I basically just slid it over so we can see the point that it cut out to the point that it actually starts up. And that is a measurement of 13.3 milliseconds. So if you remember, this has an advertised cutover of 20 milliseconds, and it performed quite a bit better. Now the monitor and PC are still running from that initial UPS test, but let's do a couple more just to make sure. So second UPS test, 3, 2, 1. So just a flicker of the lights, everything looks good. Third and final UPS test, 3, 2, 1. And everything's still running, so it does work well with sensitive devices. So with my next test on the AC inverter, I want to use my outlet tester here to determine if this has an open or floating ground or a bonded ground and if it's wired properly. So I have the AC inverter turned on. Let's go ahead and plug this in. So we get a light here in the middle, which means it does have an open or floating ground whenever you have the AC inverter on and not charging from the wall. So now I've connected in the AC wall charging cable. And if you look at my outlet tester, it is grounded now and wired properly. So whenever this is in UPS mode or charging from the wall, it becomes grounded. Now, if you listen very faintly, you'll hear a noise being picked up by the camera. Just FYI, this is not an audible noise to my ears. This is something that is some sort of interference whenever this is AC wall charging that my camera is picking up. Now I've disconnected the AC wall charging cable to demonstrate that my camera is no longer picking up that interference, and it only appears to happen when this is AC wall charging. Now, how much usable capacity should you expect from the DJI Power 1000 inverter? The internal LFP battery is rated for 1024 watt hours of capacity, and when draining the power station down until the inverter shut off, I measured 820 watt hours of usable capacity, and this result is only 80% of the advertised capacity, which is definitely below our goal of at least 85%. I would have liked to see a little bit more usable capacity in this test. Next, how much power is used as the AC inverter is enabled and sitting idle? I started with the power station at 100% state of charge and left the inverter turned on for 12 hours with no load. When I came back, it had dropped down to 74% state of charge, meaning that the inverter had used 26% of the battery after 12 hours, or about 2.1% per hour. This power usage is a little higher than normal due to the large 2200 watt inverter and the smaller battery combo. Does the power station inverter create any noise or interference? I measured only 1475 millivolts of EMI using my dirty electricity meter, so the inverter produces a very low measurement of EMI. But is that level actually audible? Plugging my guitar amp into the inverter, this is what it sounded like. Comparing the inverter output to wall power demonstrates that the DJI Power 1000 does not have any audible noise on the inverter, so it should be good to power your audio equipment. In my final AC inverter test, I wanted to see how long the Power 1000 could run my full-size basement refrigerator. Keeping your food from spoiling during an extended power outage can save you hundreds of dollars. Starting at 100% state of charge, connecting my fridge in, it was pulling around 400 watts running the internal defroster. Most fridges will do this a couple times throughout the day, and the usual power draw is around 125 watts. Checking in 12.5 hours later, the power station had turned off and it was at 0% state of charge, so pretty decent runtime on a small power station like this. Wow guys, very impressive power output numbers from this power station. Even though the inverter is rated at 2200 watts continuous, we almost got 2850 watts before it finally shut down. So you do have a bit of power available if you need to pull that amount. The only downside to that is when you have that much power, you have a larger inverter, it uses a bit of background power. So we see around 2% per hour of idle power usage. And also when we did our capacity test, we only got 80% of the advertised capacity, and that's just a trade-off with a larger inverter. Now, remember, there are the eco mode settings on the AC output. So if you don't want the inverter to be on all night wasting power, you can set it to shut off automatically whenever your load is finished running, so you can save that power if you want. Now, as for the surge loads on this, really, really good. It was able to power up all those induction loads without shutting off. So thumbs up there. And also the UPS cutover, 13.3 milliseconds. I was surprised when I saw that because this has an advertised cutover of 20 and it was much faster. So if you have this plugged into the wall in UPS mode, running your refrigerator or running a computer, something like that, it is going to swap over to the battery backup without shutting down those devices. So thumbs up there. Okay guys, in the next section of the video, I want to go over the charging options for the DJI Power 1000. Now, when you purchase it, the only cable that you get to charge is this AC wall charging cable. Now this is where you connect in that cable. It supports 100 to 120 volts AC input, and there are two charging speeds with this switch. You can swap between 1200 watts input and 600 watts input. Let's go ahead and test those out. Now first I have it set to the 600 watt charging speed, and on the screen we are getting 600 watts input. Now you'll also notice on the screen they give you an estimated time till full. It's showing 60 minutes until this is completely full. Now I've swapped over to the 1200 watt charging speed, and we are charging at 1200 watts. The estimated time has dropped, and this icon here is now moving faster. Now, if you are interested in DC charging the power station, there are a few optional accessories that you can purchase. For example, right here is a 12 to 24 volt car charger. You can see that it has the cigarette plug that you'd plug into your vehicle. You connect this to one of the SDC ports and it will charge the power station with 12 to 24 volts. Over here you have additional solar charge controllers. I'll be testing these a little bit later in the video. These are for solar input that connect also into those SDC ports. So first let's test this car charging cable. So for my first test, I have the car charging cable plugged into my 12 volt battery. Now to simulate a car connection, I have a female 12 volt socket, so just like you'd have in your vehicle, and we are getting 92 watts charging input. Now this power station has 1024 watt hours of capacity, so charging at this speed would take a little bit longer than 10 hours if the power station was completely empty. Now what happens if we use a 24 volt battery? Do we get any faster charging? I have a 12 to 24 volt boost converter that's taking the 12 volts of this battery and boosting it up to 24 volts. I have that connected into this charger. And if we look closer at the screen, we are charging at 99 watts. So just a little bit faster, but not by much. Now in my next test, I want to see if this allows dual charging, meaning you can get charging from DC and AC input at the same time. Now I have the power station set to 1200 watts and it is not allowing DC input. It is only charging with AC input. So this does not appear to dual charge when connected with both at the same time. Now right when I removed the AC charging cable, it did start charging with DC input, and the indication of that is right here. You can see the charging input voltage of 53.88 volts and 92 watts, and before that voltage was showing 0, so it was not getting any DC input, but now it is. Now in the next test, I wanted to see if this supports pass-through charging or the ability to charge and discharge the power station at the same time. So I have a 500 watt heater running off the AC inverter. I have this USB fan running, and I'm also powering this 12 volt heated blanket, and they're all working while it's charging from AC input. Okay guys, let's go ahead and do some solar testing on the DJI Power 1000. Now for the solar conditions, it is a beautiful fall day. It's around 80 degrees. We have very clear skies, so I'm expecting some pretty good numbers. Now for this test, I am going to use a bunch of these 200 watt Renogy Flex panels. We are going to connect them in parallel into the 400 watt MPPT solar charge controllers. So let me show you that setup. Now connecting up solar to this power station is fairly easy. Whenever you want to use solar, you just grab your solar charge controller and you plug it into the SDC port. And because there are 2 of those SDC ports, you can use 2 of these charge controllers. Now here's a closer look at the charge controller. They have these covers that cover up these XT60 ports. This is where you plug in each one of the solar panels. Now the solar panels that are compatible have a voltage range of 12 to 30 volts, so you can't go over 30 volts. And it says that each one of these supports 10 amps for a maximum of 400 watts output. So we'll have to see what we can get. Now for the testing today, each one of these 200 watt solar panels have a pigtail with an XT60 termination. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you can see down here that they all end in XT60, so we can plug them into the charge controllers to see how much power we can get. So I'm going to start with 1 charge controller and 2 of these solar panel connections, and then we'll try with 3 to see the maximum power. So with 2 of these solar panels connected into the charge controller, we are getting 288 watts input. So I want to test with a 3rd panel connected in and see if we get any more power. So now I have 3 solar panels connected into the charge controller, and we're seeing about the same amount of power, 288 watts. Now I have over 400 watts connected in. I think it's like 470 watts is what I've estimated, and we are only getting 288. So this might be the limitation of this charge controller. Let's go ahead and test 2 of them with 2 panels connected each. So now I have 2 solar panels connected to each one of the charge controllers. They're both connected into the power station, and now we are getting double the power input. So instead of 288, we're getting 576. So that appears to be the limit for the solar panels that we're using today. Even though we have so much more power available in the array, it is limiting it to this amount of power. Now I will say this is still fairly fast solar charging. Most 1000 watt hour power stations charge around 500 to 600 watts input, and that's exactly what we're seeing with this power station. Now for my final solar test, I want to take each one of these 200 watt panels, there are 5 of them total, and combine them into both of the charge controllers. So one charge controller is going to have 2 of them, the other charge controller is going to have 3 of them to see if we can get any more power. So with 3 of the solar panels connected here and 2 connected here, we are still seeing the same amount of power as before, right around 575 watts. Now just to give you an idea of the power that's available in these solar panels, I tested earlier today, just a couple minutes ago, and I was getting 838 watts from this array. So it does appear to be a limitation of these charge controllers, almost 600 watts that you can get on this power station. Can you have solar panels connected 24/7 to the DJI Power Station? Usually in the morning when the solar voltage is low, some power stations will beep or have alarms letting you know that something's wrong. When I tested this out on the DJI Power 1000, it just started charging even though the solar panel voltage was really low, so there are no issues having solar panels connected all the time. It'll just start charging in the morning. Okay guys, I want to do one last test here on the solar charge controller. Remember, this is rated at 400 watts and we weren't quite seeing that, so I want to use my adjustable power supply to see if there's a specific voltage or amperage level to get the full 400 watts. Now I know both of these SDC ports are rated at 400 watts, so it's probably the charge controller, but let's see what happens. Now the peak voltage input is 30 volts, so I have this set to 29.9 volts. I also have it set to 20 amps and it is pulling 10 amps right now. We're getting a little over 300 watts. Now the power is coming from my adjustable power supply into a 3-way splitter, so each port is taking an equal amount of power, and we are seeing 300 watts input. So even though we have peak voltage and maximum amperage going into this, we are not able to charge at the rated 400 watts. Now I want to quickly recap some of the things we learned about the DJI Power 1000 during those charging demos. The first thing is the base unit, the most affordable unit, only comes with an AC charging cable, so you can only charge it with AC input, no DC input, unless you purchase additional accessories or charging options. So if you have this in a portable scenario or during a power outage, you will have to charge it off an inverter generator that has a pure sine wave output. Now that is the case for all power stations, but you don't have a DC charging option with the base model. Now, plenty of people that watch my channel, they don't really care for solar. They just like the power station and charging it with AC input. So for them, that is totally fine. But if you are wanting to charge it off of DC input, either a 12 volt battery, 24 volt battery, or with solar panels, plan on purchasing those extra adapters and accessories which add to the base cost of the unit. Now in my testing, when I had both solar charge controllers connected up, I was getting 575 watts peak input. And that will charge the power station with solar in less than 2 hours, which is very similar to the competition. For example, the Blue Yeti AC180 charges at a peak input of 500 watts, and the Anker C1000 charges at a peak of 600 watts input, so this is right in between. Now there is one thing to think about though, because these ports are a shared input and output port, you will have to kind of change things up if you want to charge and discharge items at the same time. For example, if you had both solar charge controllers connected, charging it up, and you wanted to fast charge one of their DJI drones, you'd have to unplug one of the charge controllers and connect in the drone to charge it up quickly. So you kind of have to plan out what you have connected and choose whether you want to charge or discharge the power station. Now, this power station does not have smart app connectivity, so just be aware of that. You do have the ability to connect this up to your computer and plug it in to the DJI app to upgrade the firmware. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds if you're not looking for smart app connectivity, but you still want to be able to upgrade to the newest firmware versions. So it's a good balance of being able to get the best performance, but also not have your device available for anybody to just connect to it. So no smart app connectivity on this device, but you can still upgrade the firmware. Now for the actual form factor, it's a little bit shorter and more wide than some other models that I've seen. It's not very deep at all. All the inputs and outputs are on the front of the power station. You have a really nice display, you know, all your ports, DC ports, USB ports, easy to access. There's nothing really on the sides, the back, or the top of the power station. Now just be aware this also does not connect to expansion batteries, so if you are looking to purchase expansion batteries down the road, you want to look at a different option. Now DJI offers a 5-year warranty on this device. I've heard good things about their customer support, but I always like to hear from you guys. I don't have much experience there, so let me know what you guys think about DJI's customer support. If you've purchased their power stations or one of their products in the past, how has that support experience been? Make sure you throw a comment down below. Now, what is the price of this power station? Pricing is super important. It's such a competitive market, so it makes a big difference. Now, the MSRP for this product is $999, but if you look on the DJI store and on Amazon, it's $300 off right now for $699, which is a price per watt hour of 68 cents. Now, if you go through the DJI store, you do get the free charging cable as a gift. And if you want to go up to the next bundle, it's the DJI Power 1000 car combo, which gives you the 12-volt cigarette port as well. And that is priced at $748. And then if you want to go up even farther to the solar charging with the solar panels, it gets more expensive. Well, now that we've completed all the performance testing for the DJI Power 1000, let's put it through my power station grading system. Up on the screen, you're going to see 20 different requirements that a power station needs to meet in order to get a perfect score. And these are all based on viewer feedback and suggestions. So these points are exactly what my viewers are looking for. So the power station got 8.5 points out of 10 points available, or a solid B grade. Now, there were 3 different things that it did not meet. The first one being that it did not get 85% of the advertised capacity during our AC capacity test. It does not support dual charging, meaning you can charge it with AC and DC input at the same time, and it does not support smart app connectivity. So with those 3 things, it got 8.5 points out of 10 points available. Now, a big shout out to DJI for sending out this power station for this review and testing video. I really appreciate them wanting to support the channel and allow you guys to see how this unit actually performs. I do all this testing so you guys can be educated on if this one's right for you or not. And I feel if you're already in the ecosystem for DJI products, you have either some of their drones or other products, it's really cool to have that fast charging available. So you'll have to let me know what you guys think about the Power 1000 down in a comment. Now, they also have another model that's about half the size of this one if you're looking for something that's a little bit more portable. It doesn't quite pack as much power as this one, but it is a little bit more affordable, and it is a smaller unit. So make sure you check out that option as well. If you guys liked the video, please smash the thumbs up button. I'll recommend a couple of other videos that you can check out if you're interested in this sort of content. And remember, I am available through the Ask Me consulting service, so if you have any direct questions about this power station, connecting solar, or anything else that's kind of lined up with my channel content, I'm there to help you out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.